When it comes to talented singer-songwriters that really shined in 2024, Bear's name resides near the top of the list. Coming off of her critically acclaimed EP, Room for You, and tour with Good Neighbors, Bear has a lot to celebrate. Nevertheless, she's remarkably forward-thinking and is preparing fans for her debut album and headlining tour. Our conversation covers her insights from her time at the Leeds Conservatory, her formative gap year in Norway, the process behind making her first two EPs, cherished moments with fans, and so much more. Bear is an artist to pay close attention to in 2025, so I hope you watch this conversation carefully for the nuggets coming our way this year. Enjoy! Hello, everyone. Welcome to the If Ever You're Listening podcast. I'm back. I'm your host, Stanley C. And today we have a very special guest, the one and only Bear. Welcome, Bear. Very nice to meet you. How is your day going so far?
It's good. It's fun to be here. Thank you for having me. I was saying to you right before we started, but we woke up to like 6 inches of snow today, so it's a very wintry scene for the first time in Minnesota this year. So it's fun. I'm enjoying it, but yeah, lots to do before Christmas.
Yes, it's a busy period. Is there
Crazy
any is
period.
it's is there anything that you have plans for like this December that you want to get done before the new year, like personal or professional? Like,
So
are you still
much.
getting gifts and stuff like that?
I actually have accidentally left all of my Christmas shopping to the last minute. Not on purpose. I really thought I was going to get ahead of it this year and be better. And then instead I just did everything else. But no, truly, there's a long list. But I'm taking every day by day and just like anything I get done is a win. So
Completely understand.
yeah.
Well, speaking of days, let's start with day one. I'd love to hear about kind of your musical upbringing, kind of those early influences. So what were you like as a kid, and when did and how did music enter your life growing up?
Oh, oh boy. What was I like as a kid?
Yeah, were you
Great.
like shy? Were you outgoing?
Really, I think I really was very outgoing. I loved theater. And musical theater is the thing that like definitely got my foot in the door. I started singing when I was like 5 and I had my tonsils removed. So I stopped being like a little nasal kid and I kind of came out of that um with a voice, and so I think I was a loud kid. My parents say that at least. Um but yeah, I did musical theater all through sorry, all through elementary, middle school, high school. That was like my first passion, I would say. And then in high school, I also did show choir and I started taking guitar and piano lessons when I was like 7. So my parents were really supportive and were like very much putting me like at these instruments and saying practice. But my real like love for performance came from all of the shows I was doing with like the local community theater groups and everything. And then I started writing songs when I went away after high school in college. I had like dabbled before. I think like the first time I ever wrote a song on my parents' laptop garage band was like when I was in second grade. Um, but I don't think I ever really thought it was going to be something that I was going to pursue until I was in college. And I was like, oh, I really like this. And I think it came as kind of a cry for help. Like, I studied in England. I decided to, after high school, I like took a gap year. I was going to study musical theater um, and do that for university. And I was really excited about that. But then I took a gap year and I moved to Norway for a year and went to something called a folkehøyskole, which was like a year of living on a campus and just studying, no grades or anything, but you just live amongst people that are like-minded and your same age group. And it was like my first time away from home. So I went and did that for a year and studied jazz. And while I was there, I made like a band of people. We all like really listened to the Lumineers and Mumford and Sons. So we just kind of started up a project of it was a band called Bearland.
I
It
love that.
wasn't, it had nothing to do with my name, which is really funny, but that's just what we called it. And then kind of wrote music for the first time together. And it was really collaborative and really cool. And I fell in love with that. during that like little year. And I ended up taking that to England and pursuing a degree in pop music and songwriting and vocal performance. And that's where I kind of like sank into the idea of like having an artist project and being a songwriter for other people.
And this was at the Leeds Conservatory, if
Yeah.
I'm not mistaken. Okay, so you're in Leeds. You already have this experience with Bearland,
Yeah.
um, and now
But we
you're
tabled that. Like
yeah.
that was a little, it was a really transformative, like transitional project. And then when I got to college, I mostly just focused on like writing and writing as a songwriter for other people. I didn't really the bear thing came way after the fact.
Mm.
Uh, yeah, and again, like I the thing that I loved the most on the planet still at this point was performing, but as other people. Like I liked acting and like singing and in that context. So it took a lot of convincing from other people telling me that I should like put out music as myself.
That's so fascinating. When you were writing for other people still in England, where would you pull inspiration from? Would you try to write from their perspective on stuff, or were they still personal songs that you just gave to other people to sing?
Yeah, it was a very big combination of that, but primarily it was just a really collaborative process of like just chatting and like having a conversation with someone and like relating and writing a song from like a similar perspective. And then it just wasn't my vocal on the demo, but it's something that we had made together. And I think that's kind of still how I approach collaborations when I write with other artists and friends. And also still when I write for myself, I bring a lot of people into that. And I do most of my writing now with my roommates, who are in this band called Now Now. They're amazing, but I like grew up on their music, but they'll come in and we'll all just like level on something. We'll talk about whatever it is I'm like going through at the time, and we'll talk about how funny it is to feel a certain way, and that's where like the inspiration will come from typically, is those like conversations.
Oh, that's so cool. Okay, I'm loving this. We could take this in a whole direction. I want to come back to this collaborative nature of your songwriting and the way you make music. But in terms of timeline, so you're done with the Leeds Conservatory, and if I'm not mistaken, you moved back to Minnesota. How long in this time period are you between moving back and making that first EP? I'm still thinking about that.
Well, I moved back in December of 2020, just in time for Christmas. So like
Mhm.
literally this time in 2020. And then wow, actually that's weird to think about. It's been 4 years. And then I couldn't tell you when I started releasing. I think I put out my first song in on my birthday in April. I like released a demo called Worrying. But when I moved back home, a lot had changed in my life, and I moved in with my uncle and his like now wife. Um, my aunt and uncle put me up for like a year and a half in their basement, and they like gave me space to have a little studio set up, and I just did a lot of Zoom writing and posting on TikTok because I
Mhm.
had no life because I had just moved back to Minnesota after being away for like 5 years and becoming a person. So I didn't really know anybody. And it was also the middle of the pandemic. So no one, you couldn't go see anyone anyways. So it just was really isolated and staying in this basement and writing and posting on TikTok for a long time.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think through that process, I kind of wrote a couple songs and gained some perspective and decided to put out an EP of my own stuff in that year of 2021.
Got it. Okay.
But
And mistake me if I'm wrong, there's a single on this project that kind of helps with the TikTok virality of your
yeah, you're
music.
not
Yeah.
wrong. Yes, I did. In 2021, my friend Charlie and I wrote a song called Meant to Be. And it really kickstarted a lot. And I think it was a really spontaneous decision to post that song. We posted it the day we wrote it, and we woke up to just like a big reaction. And that was the first example of that I'd ever had. And it was Charlie's first TikTok ever. So
Good
he's a
luck.
lucky man in
Yeah,
the
good.
he definitely is like a good luck charm. Do you know what I mean? And he's brilliant. So we had a lot of, I mean, that really changed the game for me. And it still is something that has like nurtured my career 4 years on, which is really wild. It's about to hit 90 million streams on Spotify alone, which is terrifying. So,
No, that's well
uh,
earned. Well earned. It's a great song.
but I had never like experienced anything of the sort up until that point. And I think it was like very validating, but also just like really scary. And it kickstarted kind of it fed the rest of the EP and it like brought me to a place where I released a second EP under a label and yeah, it's been a pretty wild couple of years since that, but yes, that was on my first EP. It was really intimidating.
That's I can't imagine honestly. And so how did you approach creating the second EP halfway? Which I've read it has a kind of a very depressing and like sad kind of undertones to the theme, overarching theme. The music itself is beautiful, but kind of what you had to go through to create to get inspired to make that is something we wish you didn't have to go through. Creating that project after the success of the first EP, especially that single, how did you think about this one? Did you try to go viral with singles, or were you focused on the full body of work? Kind of what was your headspace for halfway?
Um, yeah, I think I'm really lucky. I have a pretty solid manager who has his head on his shoulders. And he was really grounding for me in that moment because I think like too, it that first EP performing so well. And not only due to meant to be, but there was a lot of hype around that. It was a really scary place to feel like you have to really follow that up and like perform a certain way. And so I don't know. I had a lot of fun making it. I made it with my now roommates, and I think they're some of my favorite songs I've ever worked on. They were just really fun and sarcastic, and
Mhm,
I did it with AWOL.
mhm,
Um, so it was kind of cool to have a team around it, and there's some like music videos that we were able to do, and it was the first time I'd ever had like a budget
mhm,
for my art. So like it just was a completely different process, but in this at the same time when we were writing it, I think it was just really important for me to not focus on like writing songs that I thought would go viral because I knew genuinely nothing would ever like I knew I wasn't just signing up for another like meant to be moment because those are really hard to fabricate. They have to just like happen. So yeah, I really just focused on writing songs that felt true to me in that time. And that time I was like a very chaotic and sad version of myself. So I think that kind of comes through in the work, but in like a hopefully relatable way. But yeah, it definitely those songs are like to this day like my favorite to perform live and I think they're really fun and like a different side of me that I would have probably been scared to show people unless I had that like foundation built up on that first EP. So it was like it was a really cool couple months of life for sure. But that project feels very isolated and like further away, I think now from where I ventured more recently and like where I started. It feels kind of like a tangent, but I'm happy it's there. That's for sure.
Love that. I love that. Yeah, I feel like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, most like when searching for you, I should say, and looking for visual elements of your music, a lot of what you get, a lot of what I've received was halfway music. So that was, I felt like that was the big moment. And I was like, okay, so this is where, and then I did more research and I found out a lot of it actually starts with the first EP. But I felt like that was also a big moment for you in terms of visually people seeing you. And your music and kind of from your perspective, did you see from the fans interactions with you? Did it change with the second EP or at the live shows? Did they gravitate more towards certain moods and songs?
Totally. Well, I think too, like we were really conscious. I was really conscious about not being like boxed into this like sad ballad girl that sings guitar, like sings songs on her guitar on the internet because of meant to be, which again is so beautiful and I'm grateful for that. But I was really scared to just like only be known as this person who does really sad songs, because what I was writing at the time was so far away from that. Like it was this like really fun pop adjacent, like I just wanted to like dance at these shows. I was sick of like singing these like depressing songs to people. So there was like a really cognitive decision made that like these songs I wanted them to feel way more just like energetic, and like we referenced a lot of like Avril Lavigne, and like I think it was also kind of at the same time as when Olivia Rodrigo had blown up with her like sour or
Sour.
yeah, sour album. Um so there was just like a lot of that in pop music, and it was just a fun space to like play around with. So yeah, when it came to performing that and putting it out, I think it drew in a little bit of a younger crowd that also then had heard Meant to Be. So it was like an interesting snowball effect. Um, but it's definitely, I would say like that project, despite like maybe not having the same numbers as my first project, numbers don't really account for anything when you really look at things this way. And like that project I saw so much growth from on like a fan base side of things, and I found a lot of people through a lot of those songs. um, and I think that's really really cool. And when I go to these shows, I also toured with Sigrid in that space, which was like an amazing opportunity. Sigrid's one of my favorite artists ever,
She's
and that brought like a really cool audience into my world. I was really lucky to be on that tour. Um, but yeah, I think definitely like it. They feel very distinct from each other, and I have like noticed differences based on like who found me during like this era, and then like okay, what's the demographic that this EP really reached, and also now then too into this new one there's like a combination of, it feels like a little bit more of an amalgamation of like the two EPs, like
hmm Well,
yeah.
we're gonna get to the that's obviously I'm for the listener, that's where I entered the fandom of Bear, and there is a fandom. There's communities online which I love to see, and that's I always I'm gonna ask Bear about that. But before that, and before talking about Room for You and that EP and kind of the process for creating that, how has touring been for you in the last couple of years for the first around the first two EPs? And then we'll talk about and up to the new tour that you've just done, and you have a new tour coming. But we'll talk about the ones that the ones you've done, and maybe how has it changed over the years for you? And you've opened for some incredible acts, including Sigrid, but many others.
I love touring. I love it genuinely. Like I I think too, based on just like my passion growing up for like being on a stage and like singing songs to an audience, that's I knew that that was what was going to be at the heart of what I wanted to do in some capacity. So it's a total childhood dream that is like realized every time I get to do that. And yeah, touring has been the sole thing that I've found that makes me feel like any of this is real,
Mm,
because my career also is something that started on the internet. And I think the first time I toured, it was like a massive wake up call, because, and I will never like get over this, but my first touring experiences was opening for Tom Adele in North America. And I was thrown onto that, from like zero. I had never, we went from zero to 100 really fast. And it was like such a beautiful experience, but like also really intimidating. Um, and I just did it with like a guitar. It was me and a guitar in these like 2,000 cap venues opening for
gee.
someone I'd admired for a long time. So that was crazy. And it was really beautiful to see in what short like span of time the people that were coming to some of these shows and like wearing my merch already, because I had really just started. And I think that was like a big slap in the face, being like, oh, wait, like you're not just reaching these accounts and like getting numbers online. Like there are people behind those accounts, and there are people behind the comments. And I had never thought about it that way because I'd never had to. And so I'm glad that that happened so early on, because I learned so much from that tour. And it's like really allowed me to like prioritize those connections that you make when you get a chance to like perform in front of an audience. and like shape your live set that way. And so now I just love it. And since then I also love traveling. I'm like really, really big on that. So the whole like stay in a hotel or stay on a sofa, drive across the country thing is like kind of fun for me. I
Mhm.
think it's definitely a lifestyle that you have to like be prepared for. Touring is exhausting and expensive. But it's something that I think because it fuels the whole like, oh, this is actually a real thing and these are real people listening, it's really worth it. The exhaustion and the expense and the yeah, it's crazy. But it's my favorite part of all of this, I would say.
And and I'm sure it's worth it for the fans too, because you've been able to be in front of them a good amount the last couple of years, right? I think it's also helped your growth. It's like you're not just dropping frequently, which is fantastic, and you're continuing to drop. You're also in front of them and performing these songs. So I think you do, your team, I should say, not just you, it does a really good job at kind of like building on top of the success that you get on a frequent basis. So I just wanted to give you guys that kudos.
Thank you for saying that. That's really cool. Yeah, it's not something that like you look at and observe while you're in it. It always comes after the fact. So
Yeah, no, it's well earned. Though I'm going to be partial for a second. I'm trying to be as objective as possible. I think for you is your magnum opus up to this point. Um, Phenomenal project, middle of nowhere. I think one of the best songs released in 2024. But the whole EP all the songs are really good, but that one it just connected with me on a different level. But talk to me about the making of this project because your sound does I see it's becoming more dynamic now. You're giving us the ballads, but you're also I feel like more comfortable in this upbeat pop space. But how did it feel making that album? What was your intentions? And then how do you feel about how it was received?
that like this the Room for You EP was like a really scary EP to make, I think, because I actually just got really honest with myself about a lot of stuff. So thematically, the things I was tackling, the things I was writing about at that time, it was like I could tell that I'd grown and that I'd been in therapy because the things I was writing, I was like, oh, I've realized some potential here, like on a mental space. And I think I'd gotten over some things that I really needed to. And so the approach and like the angle that we were taking on all the writing was like really retrospective and like they were songs that I needed to write. Room for You was a song that like showed me that I was like ready to like move on. Like I remember listening to that and feeling it so deeply and like having to separate myself from the writer that wrote it and just like listen to it and like make sure that I could actually connect to it. And I think that song just like really represents like shedding some skin, which I think I had kind of done at that point. And it's cool because I sat on that song for a year. I wrote that in the middle of writing halfway. I
Wow.
don't think I believed it until we were writing this new EP and we got a chance to reproduce it. So and like finish it and write the bridge and stuff. But it really that's that's cool to hear you say that. And Middle of Nowhere, I think that's my favorite song that I've released to date. So it means a lot to
No,
hear you say that. Like that there's like magic in that for me. I've always wanted to take like a little bit more of a actually, do you know what? I don't know why I'm lying to myself here. I've hid from like the country folk yeehaw version of myself for a long time. And I think when I
hmm
was in these first two EPs exploring songwriting, I was trying so hard to like bulldoze my way through pop music and like explore that and feel like I belonged there. And I just remember realizing like just kidding. The banjo slaps. And like maybe I feel like this is where home is in this moment and I should just like let that be it. So we really incorporated a lot of very like folk influence into that EP that I had like been hiding from for a long time. So I think it felt like coming home finally a little bit. And it's definitely been a jumping off point for this next like record that I've been working on. But yeah, with Room for You, I feel like Brad and Casey and I and all of the collaborators who have been working on my project for a long time, we all were like, "Oh, we found it. We we
Mhm.
found the sound. We found like your lane and like here we are. Let's try this." And we just kind of dove in and yeah, yeah. It feels not safe, but like soothing to
Yeah.
me. So I'm glad that that comes through.
I'm so glad to hear this. This is like I'm like pinching myself as you were saying that because I was like, I feel like if I can get her to keep making middle of nowhere flavored songs, she can be like,
You've done your job.
I've done my job. If there's any reason I've reached out, it was for this song. No, but no, that's really interesting and really good to hear. I feel like yeah, 100% continue to make more Americana folk adjacent alt folk maybe.
Yeah.
Because there are still pop, like the bridge is still pop and like, the crescendo in that song is still very big and outside of the folk space, the roots music space. But your songwriting, I think, is the through line. You could take us, and now hearing more about your experience with like theater and stuff, it makes sense because there is the story that you're really good at telling. And hearing that you wanted to be a songwriter first makes even more sense because I feel like you are a songwriter. That separates a lot of the music I'm hearing from your contemporaries, where your songwriting is just like that much better, that much more personal, that much more relatable versus others where you can kind of catch more kind of vague lines, more basic lines, more lines that we've heard before. When I hear your music, I'm like I'm not getting these songs anywhere else. So I want to stay here and discover more about her. So it's good to hear that's where
That
you're.
is like such an incredible compliment. Thank you. Like, I don't even know what to say.
No, no, no. That's
Holy
it's
cow.
I'm just speaking the truth. So listeners, guys, please, please, please listen. And there's more music to come, but we're not gonna go there yet. We still have to stick with another, I think, big achievement for you in 2024. And I'd love to hear more about what this process was like for you, but you performed on Mahogany. Um, and I'm a big fan of Mahogany. I've been watching them for years, and it sounds like you were a fan for years. So I would love to hear two things, kind of how was that experience for you, and what went behind the decision for the songs you picked? Because you have to pick two songs, a cover
Yeah.
and an original, I believe. So
Okay. First of all, yes, I have been watching Mahogany covers or Mahogany live sessions since I was in the eighth grade and I discovered what YouTube was. Okay. I just have vivid memories of that. So it's definitely something that through the process of like through this like long-winded journey of being an artist or whatever, I've always wanted to do it, but it was on the back burner for me. I was like, it'll happen when it happens. Cool. And I think Room for You really resonated with the team there, and my team is amazing. I'm so lucky to work with the people that I do. But they had reached out and said, "Hey, Bear is a fan," and they got back and were like, "Please come in." And I I was really excited. I was stupid excited.
yeah, good.
But it was really special to walk through and to choose those songs. And to be completely honest with you, all I knew when I walked into the studio that day was that I was going to sing time after time. Um, because they had asked me to prepare a cover and an original. And I think I was in this space where I was like, I don't really know what's performing well on the EP. I don't really know what's going on. I wasn't feeling very confident.
Mhm.
And I think that was probably valid for the version of me that did those sessions. But yeah, I wanted to sing time after time because I wanted to choose a timeless cover.
Mhm.
And I I just it's the only thing that could come to mind.
Mhm.
I was thinking a lot about my grandma at the time and the songs that we used to sing in the car.
Mhm.
And it just came to me and I was like, this will work. And my friend Will, I fell off a Lime bike in London and
Sorry.
I bruised my wrist and I couldn't play the guitar very well. So my friend Will was like, I've done a mahogany, I'll do it. I'll play guitar for you. And I was like, yeah. that'd be great. We went to college together, so it was so random. And he just ended up coming in and subbing in with me, and doing that with him was really special. Um,
Shout out Will. Will
Shout
killed it.
out Will. Will
Yeah,
kill
he did really good on that too.
mustache in the game. Yeah, he's incredible, and like genuinely one of the best guitarists I've met. And so that was really fun. I think I like panically was ran into him at the pub one day and was like, I have to do this live session and I can't play and this is gonna be great. And he was like, I'm just gonna save the day, and it was awesome. But yeah, I the whole team at Mahogany was so nice, particularly Mark,
Mm.
who I just have a lot of time and space for that guy. I think he so supportive, and he was quick to be like, you're singing Room for You. That's the song. That's the one.
Can't go wrong with that.
I
Cannot go
don't
wrong with
I think in my head we were like, maybe we should do It's Impressive because it's having a little bit of a moment online.
great song.
This could be good. But then Mark was like, no. Yeah,
Mhm.
yes, that's great, but like do Room for You.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay. So I had to sit down and just like figure out how to play that.
Yeah, I was about to say, because not a piano song.
It is a piano song, but I hadn't practiced it in a long time. I was like, okay, okay, okay. So yeah, he kind of coached me through it and kept assuring me, like, I promise you, this is the one. And yeah, kudos to Mark for coming through and making that decision for me because I was very indecisive and terrified. And I just wanted to do a good job because mahogany meant the world to me. So I was like, okay. But
Bear,
I,
you did a great job.
yeah, thank you.
I actually prefer the Room for You version. I mean, the Mahogany version of Room for You to the EP version because I feel like you sung it with just that much more. Like you have a very emotive vocal style, and I feel like it came across even more on the Mahogany version. So you could feel that song and what it's talking about, and you're like in the room. So I felt it. I think shout out, shout out the Mahogany team for picking that. I, of course, was rooting for Middle of Nowhere because she could do that. Mahogany and that song, but I think that you did a phenomenal job. So yeah, you killed it.
No, it was really it was like a solid, really fun couple of hours. And it was wild to like walk into this beautiful like garden studio that they have built out. It's just like a really cool set, and the whole team was so nice. And yeah, we just got to spend like 3 hours singing. It couldn't have like been easier on the soul. Like it was really, really cool. And yeah.
Amazing. So looking back at 2024, how do you look back at it at this point? I know we're still in it, but we're at the last couple days, kind of. What are some highlights for you? Maybe from the road or in terms of maybe not numbers, but kind of maybe fan interactions.
Yeah, I think it was like a year of growth for me. Putting out this Room for You EP was like a pinnacle of that. I think I have, yeah, there was a lot of like realized growth that happened. And I put that EP out in May, and I
Mhm.
played a show in my hometown, and it was the biggest show I'd played. And speaking of like fan interactions, well, I think like the funny thing about it is like if you had told me 3 years ago that like I would be playing these shows and like selling them out for 700 people and bringing people in from Canada who have driven, I would laugh in your face. Because again, I didn't even think I was gonna do the artist thing. So
Mm.
it's just been something that I've really had to like accept and like lean into and like throw love at. But yeah, I a couple really very reaffirming fan interactions that I had this year, like that have just really stuck with me. I did a lot of shows this year because I toured, which was amazing. And every time I get the opportunity to like be in front of a new group of people, I just try and throw some jokes their way and sing a cover and win them over somehow.
Mhm.
But people were really responsive and lovely. These two girls from Canada drove to Minneapolis for my hometown show for the EP release, and they brought me like ketchup chips and like things that they knew that I would like from Canada, and that was so sweet. And friendship bracelets, and they those kind of interactions really just make you feel like not only are people like listening to the music, but they're living with the music. They're really taking it on and like I was gonna say holding space for it, but ever since the holding space for Defying Gravity,
Yeah, yeah.
they're holding space for the lyrics of Room for You, and that's amazing. But no, genuinely, like it's been a really cool like thing to see people dive into and not just like passively
Mhm.
participate in.
Yep.
Um, there's this really beautiful group of friends and fans that have like connected through my Discord. And
Mm.
my Discord is now just their group chat, which I think is horrible. They plan trips around some of my like Europe shows. So I got a chance to play an acoustic set in London, and a lot of them traveled for that, and that was really special. Um, and I just it's crazy when you really do start to like see that these people are real and that they like are not just interacting, but they're interacting and they're like participating in this with you. Like now when I'm writing these songs for this new project, I'm thinking like, oh, I really hope that they like this because
Mhm.
I like this, and I just really I want it to feel like something that we're all like in together.
Mm.
So yeah, I think this year has like shown prioritized a lot of that for me, and like yeah, I
No,
also yeah.
I think that's beautiful, and the the culmination of this is that you're still working. You're getting us ready for 2025. And my next question is how how are you feeling about 2025? There's a lot of exciting updates. I'll let you describe them as much as you want to share. But kind of what can we expect? There may or may not be a show in New York that I may or may not be at. As a New Jersey resident, I'm definitely going to be there. So if you see a dude with a hat and he's like screaming when Middle of Nowhere plays, if it's played, it does not have to be played, but any room for you song there, that'll be me. But kind of from your perspective, how are you feeling about 2025 and what could your supporters expect?
I'm really excited. I actually feel really rejuvenated going into 2025, which is not a feeling that I felt last year at this time, and it's not a feeling that I felt the year before at this time. So it's good. I managed to prioritize rest a little bit this year. So hopefully that means we get to kind of kick it into the next gear. But I am going to release an album next year, which I'm really excited about. It's my first full length project, and it's something that I've been working on for the last few months. I think the writing's done, which is great.
Mhm.
So we just now have to like dig into it a little bit. Um, and we're kind of hitting the ground running. I have a show January 11th in Minneapolis, but it'll be my biggest headline show to date
Congratulations.
at First Avenue, which is an iconic venue for this city and for the Midwest. And it's like I grew up in northern Minnesota, so when we would come down to Minneapolis, I thought that this was New York for a long time. And then like we would go to the big lake and I'd be like, cool, that's the ocean. Like I didn't know. So First Avenue is like my Madison Square Garden, if you will.
Yeah.
So it's really exciting. And yeah, I really can't wait to play. And we're gonna like perform some new songs and try them out. And then yeah, I had a tour scheduled for the first quarter of this next year, but it has been postponed. But there will be shows in New York and all across the states with a band that I adore from the UK. I'm at some point in the next year, so that'll be really fun. Um, and hopefully just a lot more of that. I'd really like to get over and tour in the UK and EU.
Yeah.
Never really done. I've done a few small headline bits over there, but I've never done anything on the touring
For
scope of.
your headline in your oh, I see what you're saying. Because I was like, you've performed in Europe, but it wasn't yours. And you have such a history with Europe. So I feel like that is an important place for your story to really resonate. Do you find your European fans, how are they interacting with your music versus Americans?
It's just different on both sides of the scale, but like I adore all sides of it at this point. I think UK and EU crowds can be a little harder to like win over or read, maybe. But then you'll talk to them after and they'll be like, that was amazing. I think like in very standard, like stereotypical practice, Americans are just louder and like more keen to like scream at you. But I don't know. I haven't done enough of it over in the UK or the EU outside of like festivals, which is crazy. That's a whole nother world that like I'm not at all grouping those two into each other and like describing how those experiences are so different. But yeah, hopefully there's a couple more festivals down the line too. Um, I think with this album, it'll be really fun to get out and perform these songs because there's a big mix of all sorts.
That's what I was going. My next album question was going to be, can you talk about what it sounds like, whatever degree you can? Are we getting further into the pop space? Are we getting more introspective with the slower songs? Is there more folk songs? Is there more alternative music? Where are we currently? Because I know that part is still being worked on.
Yeah, I mean, anything I say is going to sound kind of um, random, I would say. Like, there's a little bit of all of that. I have been referencing a lot of like George Michael and Shania Twain and some of the greats. So I think it's going to kind of land. It'll be, I don't, haven't quite gotten to the point where I know how to describe where we're at. But no, there's a lot of really beautiful tunes on it that I wrote in the space of like 72 hours in a cabin in Wisconsin with two of my closest friends. So
Mm,
there's that corner of it that feel really um, homemade and like they were born out of the Midwest. And
mm.
like I just adore that. And then there's gonna be I don't know, I have a couple tricks up my sleeve, I think. And I'm getting excited to show people a side of me that they haven't seen yet. Uh,
Love that.
yeah.
That's freaking.
Again, I'm trying not to beat any dead horses
No.
um, in any way, shape, or form, both metaphorically and literally. So, so we're not just like doing a bunch of whatever forevers this go around. Like, I think there will be, yeah, we're we're on an adventure with it a little bit, but I'm really excited to dive into the production. I'm feeling really excited about where it's headed sonically. And I think my roommate Brad, who's producing the whole EP, their record is he's a genius. So it'll be really fun to like work on that with him.
Shout out, Brad. Thank you in advance, Brad, for the work you're about to do and continue to do. No, that's super exciting. I can't wait to hear it. I'm gonna listen to it day one. And if it's anything like an uplift to what you've already created, that means it's gonna be out of this world. So, and no shade to Whatever Forever. Love that record. It was a big summer record on a personal note in like the June, July period. But yeah, a trick would be even cooler. I like how you said you have a couple tricks up your sleeve. That's gonna be fun.
I don't I have this feeling that people aren't expecting me to go where I've gone. So I'm excited about that.
That's so cool. Okay, so we've finished the concluded my artist specific questions. So those are all of my questions specific to you, Bear. My next four questions or five questions, I think I've added one, are my if ever you're listening questions. So the name of my blog is If Ever You're Listening, my Substack
Yeah.
podcast. And so these are questions I ask anybody I'm talking to. So they're going to be more general questions. But I'm very curious what you'll say to a few of these. So the first one is about your Spotify Wrapped, your Apple Music Wrapped. How did it come out this year? Was there any notable albums or songs that you found in those playlists?
I'm really embarrassed about this, but I was totally my top artist, which is just, I think, a crime. And I think I should be able to like exclude that because I promise you, No, I wasn't. But according to Spotify Wrapped, I was. Um, my top album of the year was the Clairo record Charm.
Nice.
I think is fun. It was just my go-to to put on in the car when we were on the road.
Mhm.
And I think I rinsed it. I
Mhm.
think it's brilliant. I love Clairo.
Same.
I was ready for a new record.
Same.
Uh, so yeah,
Mhm.
that my
Mhm.
favorite track on it is probably, I mean, I think Juna,
Beautiful record. Beautiful tune.
crazy, and wait for time to be sad about it. Sad. Ugh. Um, but no, I another tune or like album that kind of took over for me this year was Big Ideas by Remy Wolf.
Yeah, that was one of my favorites of the year. Yeah.
I also saw Remy live twice. I She's one of my fave live acts. I think she's brilliant. I'm going to see her for my birthday next year at Red Rocks.
Oh, that's gonna be nice.
I think I'm probably gonna shed a tear or two. But yeah, got to see her cover of Life is a Highway.
Yes.
My jaw was on the floor for like she's so good. So I think those were kind of crazy. And then actually my number three top song was Lilo by Chris Lanzin. And that's really funny because last year or last week I put out an extended version of that song with him.
Oh, that is ironic. How did that? That's
Well,
just chance.
chance,
Yeah.
but also that God, I met Chris this year through this song. He had posted it on Spotify, or no, sorry, on TikTok. And
Mhm.
I had seen a snippet of it before it had blown up. And there was a period after like right before I released my EP that I was kind of struggling
Mhm.
um, as an artist and just with social media. And my mental health was not great. It's been a bit of a roller coaster year for that. And so I was definitely in like a doom scroll back in April.
Mhm.
And he came up on my For You page and I just loved it. I loved it so much. And I never do this, but I like immediately went, followed him, messaged him just to be like, thank you for this. I really needed this song today. And he like responded and was like, I just listen to Room for You. That's a beautiful song. So we kind of just started talking and create like a friendship sort of blossomed over the internet through just like mutual adoration for each other's work. And he lives in Australia. We've never met. He We have lived polar opposite, but the exact same life
Mm.
up until this point, and we just like bonded over a lot of stuff. So when Lilo, like we were both touring, we were both putting out these EPs, we just kind of kept like showing up for each other. And yeah, I think at one day I just texted him because I'd sat down at my piano and the lyrics of this song had been following me all year. And I was listening to it a lot. You know, when you're listening to something a lot and it just like keeps hitting you in the face.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I think my Spotify rap told me I listened to that song like 782 times. So it was a lot. I really like the song. But I'd sat down at my piano and opened my book up, and there's a line in the song about parallel lives and or parallel lines. And I opened it up to this like song in this piano book called Parallel Lines. And so I snapped him a photo and sent it to him and was like, haha. And he texted me in that exact moment and was like, hey, I'm thinking about doing an extended version of Lilo. Would you want to feature on it and write a verse? Like,
Mm.
yeah, absolutely. I would. This is my favorite song of 2024. So we like worked on that together and put out an extended version last week,
Wow.
um, which has been like a fun way to like end the year, I would say. But yeah, it was kind of this thing that was out of our control a little bit, and we uh, yeah, I'm happy to have like done another collaboration this year. I got two under my belt and they were really special, both of them.
Oh, I
So
love that. I love that. There's so much serendipity. There's so much fate in that story that I just wanted that story to live on its own. I have no comments. That's just amazing. I love everything. And listen to Lilo. It's a beautiful song. I did hear it when you released it last week. So thank you for touching on that. For songs, so that's a song you played a lot. So for my next question is actually about songs that are kind of go underneath the radar. So for you, what songs of yours do you consider the most underrated or underappreciated across your music career and why?
what songs of mine?
Hmm.
Whoa, that's a scary question. Underrated.
Should have been streamed more.
Should have been
More
straight.
more
Justice,
people should be talking about it.
justice for, well, I think Oh to Be Cool
Mhm.
deserves a moment someday. I
There's,
don't know if I know how to market that. I think,
there's
but
ways.
I
Yeah.
love that song. It's so fun, and I'm excited for people to find that in their own time. Um, but I think honestly, Halfway is super underrated. Every time I sing it, I'm like, oh, I really feel this, and I made it the title track for a reason on this last EP. So probably probably Halfway is probably like my most underrated
A good
song.
pick. No, that's a really good pick. Stream
In
halfway, guys. Play it. And sorry.
like in my brain. I wonder
You're right.
what people say. I'm
No,
not
it
sure,
is. It
but
is. Yeah, it doesn't get it. I don't see it getting the love some of your other songs get, and it deserves it. The Thank you for answering that question. I know it's a tough question, and it makes some artists uncomfortable. So I've had artists refuse to answer that question, um, or they've given me other artists' music, and I was like, no, I want to hear your opinion on your music. I know you're fans of other people's music, so I thank you so much. That's why I greatly appreciate it. If you could, my next question is, if you could change anything about the music industry, what would it be and why?
oh God.
Up to this point, maybe based on your experience.
Oh, I have a list.
I know, yeah, I could see it in your face.
I think a lot of people do.
Yeah,
Um, it's just tough.
yeah.
I don't think artists are paid for their art. It's terrifying and so sad. And like music is so commodified now.
Hmm.
Um, I think Spotify should be like $100 a month. Do you know how crazy it is to be able to pay a small amount of dollars per month and have access to every song ever created ever?
Makes no
Back
sense.
when like fandoms used to be born out of people buying records.
Mm,
Crazy. But I just don't see a solution for it anytime soon, and like it is what it is. I just think it's unfortunate. Um, and I wish that songwriters were compensated for the work that they do and that there was more of a conversation around this. I do see it growing, which is a beautiful thing. Um, you know, yeah, I think artists are being louder about the people that they work with. And I think there's a lot more collaboration in music now. So it's becoming more apparent. But it's just funny. It's just funny how we've like come to this like conclusion that like those things aren't worth
no.
anything. So I think this is a really loaded question that you've asked me. And I think I could like talk about these things for an hour and a half. And
Yes.
um,
You've given great answers, though. I think the songwriter one is really potent, and I haven't heard that one as often as it should be said. So I'm glad you brought that up, especially as a songwriter with your
yeah.
history of songwriting. I think that needs to be talked about more. And even the monetary, I like you gave a solution because my thing is like how if you could change, what would it be? And you've given like the make Spotify more expensive, like because
Well,
it's
and like Spotify being more expensive isn't the answer.
no,
I'll be the first person to say that. I'm just giving that as like an example of why I think it's such a bummer that we've really like kind of watered everything down to it being this thing that's good for the consumer, which is incredible. I think listeners are 90% of the equation. So it's amazing that as an artist, people have access to my art. I think that's like so cool. But I just wish that there was more. Like, I think the whole label orchestrated, like, the system doesn't work anymore. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens in the next many years. But I think major labels have screwed the pooch bit.
Big, big time.
And it's just interesting because it, of course, like TikTok has totally changed the game. And
Mhm.
as an artist, there's one thing I love doing the most. It's posting my art on TikTok. Just kidding. I hate it. So I think like, yeah, it's the thing that I'm really trying to tackle in the new year is just learning how to use things as tools in a tool belt and get my music in front of people that I want to hear it. But it's harder and harder than ever before, I would say. Outside of it also being way easier than it's ever been. Doesn't
Yeah,
make
it's more accessible, but it's also harder to get bigger.
it.
Like it's easy to start, but it's hard to like go anywhere with it. Yeah.
Yep. Um, no one has figured it out, and that's why it's this way.
Yep.
That's really an important thing to stress. So
Mhm.
I do, yeah. I I would love to see the industry change. I don't think it will. uh, so there's a lot I would change. But I'm also just happy to be able to have my head above water, and I'm really like honored that people listen. And like there's a double-edged sword there for sure.
And then my final question is, I always change. I like changing this final question, but I think this is applicable to what we're talking about is if you were to talk to, and you odds are you have done this, but for the sake of this is for artists starting out. So maybe Bear 4 years ago in December 2020. Um, artists maybe even who had less experience than you did. They've never performed in front of an audience before. They do not have a fan base at all. For those artists that need to get, they don't have relationships yet with people in the industry or labels or publishing companies. For artists in that stage, what would be some advice you would give them just to get their feet wet and to begin the process, kind of based on your experience?
Um, Based on my experience alone, because again, I think people that are artists and that write, we all do it for different reasons. Everyone is different. Everyone's like relationship to self promotion is different. Everyone's relationship to all of it is very different. I think the biggest thing from my experience that I've learned over the last 3 years is that it's not ever once been that deep. Like it's just not me overthinking the things that I was doing is the sole thing that got in the way of me taking any step forward. And being like afraid to come off as cringy or being afraid to do this, like put myself out there at any capacity is the thing that was interrupting me. So I've had to like consistently remind myself that I'm not Beyonce and that I'm allowed to like post a selfie and not have a caption and that's fine. Like you have to just take things and like go with the flow and go through the flow. Um but it's just not that deep. Like you don't have to gatekeep your songs. You also don't have to share them at the capacity that everyone else is doing it. Like you can kind of pave your own way with it. You just have to like listen to yourself and your instincts. And that's the only way that your art's gonna find the right people anyways. So I'm still figuring this out. This is something that like I mean, Sabrina Carpenter, who's at the height of her career, is still figuring out. It's not something that just clicks. But for me, when I first started like posting on TikTok, all I had to really do was just hold myself accountable for posting every day and just trying to make sure that I was putting myself first a little bit and not thinking too much about if people liked it or not. I think that's like the scariest part. So I don't know though.
Well, no, that's great advice. And I want to thank you, Bear, for speaking with me today for the If Ever Listening podcast. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for making music. Thank you for creating.
Thank you
Um,
for listening.
we greatly, greatly appreciate it.
No, this has been an awesome chat. Thank you. It's like fun to talk about these things. And yeah,